Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning. And we're out here on a pretty chilly and frosty morning. It's in the low 30s and there's still frost all over the grass behind the camera here. But I've definitely got another interesting combination out here today, and I don't know what we're going to get out of it, to be honest with you. It might look pretty good, it might look absolutely terrible, but we're going to find out and see one way or the other. So for the load I've got out here today, if you've been around the channel for some time, you know that we've tested my grandfather's hand-loaded shells from around the mid-80s. He had a turkey load, he had a duck load, and he had a goose load. So I've brought out some more of his hand-loaded turkey shells. Now they are not Winchester Ranger shells, but if you can see on the top there, they are a 3-inch, 1.5 ounce of lead 4s. And here's what those shells look like. He loaded them up in old paper double-aught buck shells. And I'll post some pictures up here on the screen. We won't go through today and tear one of these apart, but I have torn them apart in a previous video. But they're just lead number 4s wrapped in what looks like a piece of plastic or mylar, little wrap around the actual shot column. So definitely pretty interesting for a turkey load and something you don't see in today's loads, that's for sure. Now when we've tested these in the past, they've done okay. I mean, they're not anything, you know, super amazing compared to today's loads, that's for sure, but they've absolutely been good enough to take a turkey out at 40 yards. So I'm curious to see what today's setup is going to actually do with them. And speaking of that setup, I've brought out the Remington 1187 again. However, I threw in this choke, and it's been a little while since we've seen it, but this is the Carlson's heavyweight TSS 640 constriction choke. So much more on the tighter side than a lot of other turkey chokes, which I'm curious how that 640 constriction is going to play with not only the lead 4s, but how they're loaded too, without really a wad, just with that plastic wrap around the shot column. It might throw a really tight pattern. It might blow the pattern completely wide open and it looks terrible. I don't know. But as for the test, we're going to run it the same as we usually do. I have the turkey target set up at 40 yards. I also have the chronograph, so we'll be able to see what kind of speed we're running. So let's get you guys a view of this target. I'll head up and take the shot. We'll look at what kind of speed we had, and then we'll go down range and see how they actually performed. So let's head over here and shoot them and see what my grandfather's old hand-loaded turkey loads will do through this tight of a choke. Okay, so that shell gave us 1238 through the chrono. That's right about what I remember them being, is low 1200s. And overall here, it's right about what I would expect to see, really. So I definitely think he's kind of right on the money with how he loaded these as far as velocity is concerned. But how did they actually shoot down range? Let's go down and take a look. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. Now, we do have a dead bird here. There are two right up there in his head, one that clipped the brain and one that clipped the spine. So he is absolutely a dead bird. However, I think the majority, or at least the core area of our pattern, was over to the left for whatever reason here. That choke probably just hits a little bit to the left out of that gun, which is a little bit unfortunate because I think if that pattern was a little bit more centered up, it would look even better. But looking at the pattern, this is not too bad at all for what that load is and how it's loaded. I mean, that core area right there, if that was centered up, I mean, there's nowhere that bird's going to be able to move his head through that and be able to make it. That's not too bad at all, considering what this combination actually is. Now, yes, being how it's loaded and a tight choke, we do see some flyers around the edges here, which was to be expected for a combination like that, but for that core area right there, that was hand loaded 40 years ago and doesn't even use a wad, it just uses the little plastic wrap. I'm not complaining at all for what that gave us. I just really wish it was more centered up, because it would look a whole lot better if it was. But overall here, it looks like these old loads might like a little bit tighter choke. And whether or not it's 40 years ago or today, if you have a pattern like that, it's gonna take the turkey. There's no doubt about it. So overall here, I'm definitely pretty happy with how it performed, all things considering. And to be honest with you, that looks a little bit better than some of the $40 or $50 a box loads you can buy today. Like the Remington Nitro Turkey stuff or the Heavy Shot Bismuth loads. I would rather have this, but at the end of the day, it would have absolutely done the job for you. There's no doubt about that. Okay, and as for the little plastic or mylar little wrap piece, I, for whatever reason, could not find it. I scanned and scanned and scanned on my range here, and I cannot find it. But in the meantime, I'll throw a picture up of one of the previous ones that we've tested, just so you can kind of see what it looks like after being shot. Not really anything too special to see, and I'm sure it's going to look pretty similar to that from today's shot as well. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that right there? For what that load is, and for the combination that we ran it out of, I don't have a whole lot of complaints. I just wish it was a little bit more centered up, and it would probably look a lot better. But that core area right over there to the left of that bird, if that was centered up, there's nowhere in a basketball-sized circle, at least, that bird's going to be able to move his head and squeak through that pattern. So I definitely think it did pretty decent, all things considered, on how it's loaded and the setup we ran it through today. But as always, leave your thoughts in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little bit surprised? And if you hand-loaded stuff or have shot hand-loaded stuff from back then, what kind of has been your experience with them, and how does this perform in comparison to what was available back then? Leave all that down in the comments. But on that note, I've got a few more tests to film for y'all, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we do have the channel Instagram as well as the channel mailbox now, where you can send things to the channel. So if you're interested in that information, it will be in the description below. But I'm going to jump back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.